Friends, I want to tell you something, and this is just between you and me, because if Martin finds out what we're talking about, he will be all up in the puns about mummies and pyramids and sphinxes. All right, you know where I'm going with this. I'm going to talk about ancient Egypt. That's right. But later on in this very episode is when I will be talking about that. You will hear why the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG teamed up with Egyptologists to make better wine more sustainably. And I promise you, this is no pyramid scheme. At least I don't sphinx it is. This campaign was financed according to EU regulation number 1308/13.
Catherine, I got nothing today.
You got nothing?
I got nothing. I mean, our episode right now is about packaging, and all the package jokes I have are not on brand for me. So I got nothing. We just got to go launch into it.
Too bad. Too bad. And welcome to The Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot button topics in the wine world. I am your host, Catherine Cole.
And I'm your host, Martin Reyes, Master of Wine. And on this episode of The Foretop, we're going to talk about my package, your package, everyone's package. No. Get your mind out of the gutter. We're going to talk about packaging.
Yes, we're thinking of titling this episode OMG Styrofoam because we can't believe it's 2023 and we're still receiving wine shipments with styrofoam packing.
But you know what?
What?
It turns out plastic is a big issue.
It's huge.
Because styrofoam is a form of that, right? Everything from fossil fuel. It's a big issue, especially in Napa Green and across wine industry. You know, lots of wineries don't like that they can't hand out single-use water bottles to visitors.
Or they can, but if they do, they're evil because...
because they want to be certified they want to get to certification, right? So that's one of those hurdles for them. So yeah. And of course, we know plastic is made from the crude oil. Styrofoam is also natural gas. So...
A lot of people don't know that plastic and styrofoam comes from the petroleum industry. I mean, this is crazy stuff.
Yeah, and so we did go deep into glass in episode 109 of The Foretop.
Yeah.
And we look forward to talking about plastic and aluminum and all things around that in this episode. But of course, there's still more to say about glass.
Yeah, and we have two amazing guests who are going to help us sort through all this recycling. So delighted to introduce Kristin Olszewski. She's a founder and CEO of Nomadica Wine, a collection of premium wines sold in sustainable packaging. And these are slim, elegant, beautiful cans. They're designed by artists. The packaging is designed by artists. And those cans are packaged in beautiful, recyclable cardboard boxes. And Kristin, I understand that you are a fellow survivor of Harvard, where you were studying medicine or pre-med?
I actually ended up dropping out of medical school to be a sommelier. Just the craziness. Yeah.
That's a movie.
I think that was a wise decision. And you're currently wine director at the Georgian Hotel in Santa Monica, on top of running this amazing business. Kristin has also been featured in Forbes, Vogue, Fine Pair, and is one of Wine Enthusiast's vaunted 40 under 40.
So excited to be here.
I would love to introduce a friend of mine, Nicolas Quillé. Nicolas, if those of you who don't want to go down the French pronunciation, Quillé. Nicolas, he's also a fellow master of wine, but he is a master of many things. He has degrees from the University of Dijon in Burgundy and from the University of Reims in Champagne. And he also has an MBA from the University of Washington in Seattle. Nicolas, I got to tell you, I thought I had a long bio. This dude doubles me. All right. Nicolas has worked for wineries in Burgundy, Provence, Champagne, the Rhone Valley, the Odo Valley, Oregon, Washington, California. He's currently chief wine grower and operations officer for the Crimson Wine Group, supervising the farming of the winemaking for 6 estates. And he's also the co-author of one of the best geeked up wine books that I have ever read. The 4th edition of Understanding Wine Technology. And we can keep going. He's done so much for the industry. Welcome, Nicolas.
Thank you, Martin.
So excited to have you both. And you know what, Nicolas, I just want to get nerdy right away because I really enjoyed your article for Porto Protocol. And for those of you who are interested, check out the Porto Protocol website. Nicolas wrote a terrific article that took a really big picture view of the problems we face with packaging and what the wine world needs to do to change. So, Nicolas, could you just kind of set the scene for us and let us know what we're facing here and what we need to start thinking about?
You mean as far as climate change, what we're facing? I think we all know what we're facing. Or at least most humans on this planet know what we're facing, except a few folks that are putting their head in the sand. But yeah. I think what we're facing is a disconnect between what the industry is doing and what we should be doing for the planet in general, in two ways: to minimize waste, and secondly, to reduce our carbon footprint. Most of the industry of the wine that is sold today is sold in a glass bottle that is potentially highly recyclable, but has a terrible carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm. But there are also, there are alternative packages that may not be great alternatives. I mean, I understand that bag and box is not so great because the plastic bag is not something that's very recyclable, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, life is full of compromises and choices. And so every time we buy something that has a package around it, there is a end of life, I guess, that we have to take into account. And so plastic as an end of life that is different than glass, yes, or aluminum, and it's very different from in different places. And so, for example, a recycling rate of glass in Maine is close to 80%. It's down to 4% in Louisiana.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Within the United States, the recycling rate will vary greatly from one place to another. So one solution that might be fantastic for one little corner may not be appropriate for another part of the country or the world. So it's a very complex issue.
It's clear that our recycling system is broken. We know that. There's been articles about that. Much of what we have shipped off and recycling to different parts of the world is now being redirected into landfill. And so we need to recognize that as consumers, every day we make choices about what we buy, the packaging it comes in, and then what we do with that. And we've been led into thinking it's all easy. Just put it into mixed recycling, but the system itself is broken. The manufacturing itself, which doesn't talk to the recyclers about how to make their products genuinely recyclable, that whole system is broken too. And I wanted to underscore that part. And there's a lot more where that came from. This is a big topic.
Yeah, I'll add one thing to that, which is the basic of any system should be the what we call the 3 R's. First, you reduce the use. Mm-hmm. Then you reduce the package if you can, or you reuse the material. And then lastly, you recycle it. When we talk about packaging, there's also a whole aspect of how do you reduce the amount of it? How do you reuse it several times if you could? And then we can worry about the recyclability. What I mean by that, recycling is really the last thing we should worry about. Yet here, as you said, we're not even on par as far as the quality of recycling, let alone reducing our use and reusing our package.
And can I say something about the reduce part? I feel like so many wine regions and wineries come out with a, proclamation. Oh, we're using lighter glass bottles. We're done. We're green now. Congratulations to us. We've chosen to work with lighter glass bottles, so everything's better. And it's like, that's reducing, yes, but that is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, a good step, but not the final step. Yes.
Can't wash your hands just because you've chosen a lighter glass bottle. Right?
Kristin, talk to us a little bit about what you're doing.
So I started Nomadica Wines over 5 years ago. We were the first player to launch premium wine in can. All of my wine industry friends told me that it was the worst idea they'd ever heard and cautious against it. And I, to be honest, was anti-canned wine myself. At the time, I really hadn't had anything that I'd want to take a second sip of. And so even getting reputable winemakers to agree to work with me was, I think, the biggest challenge day one. But that's why I'm happy we are where we are now. And cans have half the carbon footprint of bottle. And we were just talking about bag and box. I know the plastic can be problematic, but the research I've seen shows that has an eighth of the carbon footprint compared to 750. And I think it's a never ending rabbit hole of how do we achieve perfection here.
In terms of carbon footprint, the alternative packaging, for the most part, is some degree better than glass when it comes to the production of that packaging and when it comes to the shipment because of the weight.
But
what?
But we all have microplastics in our bodies because plastic doesn't break down. So it's kind of,
right.
They're both terrible, right? I mean,
yeah, I was going to say, I'm getting all of this from Melissa Saunders' Master of Wine research paper. She was kind enough to share that with me, and it was a big impetus for us early on.
She was on
in
that
thinking,
episode.
Yep, and we're launching boxed wine in September, which I'm so excited about because as a company, we've committed ourselves to not only being proprietors of alternative packaging and premium juice, but I really think of that as kind of the gateway drug for a younger consumer to get into wine, which I think is the other really big problem plaguing the wine industry right now.
It is. And maybe around that idea is the re-education of what the consumer's responsibility is, which isn't, if it's done right, it's not that hard. You know, those almond milk jugs we see now, and there's a little tab that says pull here to separate the hard plastic from the paper.
Mm-hmm.
It will, I hope, become second nature for us to then take the bag out of the box when you're done with that wine.
So, Kristin, how do we recycle that bag that's in the box?
The bag is not recyclable. They have not figured out a way to do that yet. The outer packaging is recyclable, but it is still better in terms of its carbon footprint than a glass bottle. And aluminum is recyclable, and our cans are BPA free.
Yeah.
I just want to make some fans on this post. And we've recently just shifted. We finally hit the production metrics. And you mentioned, Catherine, that our cans are very beautiful. We partner with artists on each label because there's a perception about canned wine that I am fighting on the daily. And so, you know, if I'm standing in front of you as your sommelier telling you this Brunello di Montalcino tastes like God walking down your throat in velvet slippers, you're going to love that. But we thought, how do we take the sommelier and put her on the retail shelf? So we had to work really hard to find a person who could print directly on the can and get it right. And I'm very pleased to announce that as of last month, we're no longer using paper wraps on our cans.
Oh, nice. And Nicolas, I remember you were asking something about BPA. What is your hesitation with BPA lined cans, which are not what Nomadica is doing?
Yeah, I'm sure many listeners don't understand that many canned products are lined with some polymer of some sort. It's an epoxy. That epoxy is quite likely to have some bisphenol A, that BPA that we're talking about, which has been linked to cancer. And it is not a type of liner or inside the can that is common. And so, you know, kudos to Kristin for selecting that can. But many cans are not like this, including sometimes your vegetables in can, by the way. There are some vegetable in cans that are about 10 or 15% of them that are with a BPA liner. I don't like the idea of putting microplastic in my body. So I tend to shy away from that.
And if you listen to the way in which packaging has all these trade-offs, and Nicolas, you mentioned earlier on that decisions of going one path has unintended consequences, less recyclability for bag and box, and yet much lighter carbon footprint on multiple levels, whereas glass is infinitely recyclable. Aluminum is, I think, from what I understand, right?
I think it is, yeah.
Infinitely recyclable.
Infinitely, yeah. But then glass, it's so much heavier, right? And so I recall, Nicolas, one of the most testiest exchanges in the Porto Protocol podcast. You know what I'm talking about, Nicolas, where you were there with two or three other, and there was like there's a glass manufacturer. I remember that. So every time you bring a glass manufacturer in a conversation about glass, is really fun. Right.
It's really fun.
PET versus glass, plastic versus glass.
That's right. That was great.
Oh my gosh. I saw that and I was like eating popcorn. I was like, there was a tense moment between both of you, and the moderator's like, She couldn't even get a word in edgewise because both plastic and therefore PET and the lighter aspects around that, which can be recycled on some level, has merits. And then on the glass on the other side has its own merits and its own pitfalls, and just back and forth like a ping pong match. It was awesome to watch. A bit tense, almost like Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's like fun, but not fun to watch.
Yeah. Martin, if I would have a magic wand, what I would like to do is to always ship the wine in bulk towards its market of consumption, and then find a container. Right now, I think glass would be a good container for this, that would be refillable at destination. And so you have a closed loop system where the container is reused many times. That would be fantastic. But we're talking about the same problem than having electrical cars, almost like an entire...
A systemic change.
Yes, supply chain has to be reinvented.
And Nicolas, haven't people like Gotham Project tried to launch these programs with very little success? I mean, consumers don't want to do the extra work. And I think that's the problem that we face, right? Like, how do we make things convenient and easy and accessible while still being sustainable?
You nailed it.
Well, so I think in the last episode when we talked about glass, we did talk about a universal bottle shape so that maybe recyclers wouldn't even have to break bottles down if they're all the same shape and size. And then, Nicolas, in your article, I learned something that I hadn't thought of, a unique glass color, so that if all wine glass was the same color, again, there'd be no need to break these bottles down and recycle them because they could be reused universally. I just hadn't thought of that.
It would be a first step, Catherine, to have that glass color the same, because at the very least for the recycling, there would not be separation of different colors. That's a big problem right now. What we call flint glass, which you may call clear glass or transparent glass, that glass has to be made almost entirely from new sand and new lime because it's impossible to separate flint glass in a waste stream. Versus green glass, I can accept a little bit of other colors, and then they can tweak it so it looks green or whatever. If they would have one color, well, then you don't have to sort it anymore. It would be much easier. Yes, so one color, one shape would be awesome, but even one color and 10 acceptable shapes, a Hock bottle for a Riesling, a Burgundy bottle, a Claret bottle for a Bordeaux blend, that would be okay to have a few shapes, as long as they're universal and the same color. That would be a huge advance.
You know what strikes me is I feel like the issue is the wine industry is kind of like Marie Antoinette. We're so vain. We have to have that clear glass. It has to look this way. And if it's a Provençal rosé, the bigger the better, and it's just so stupid.
Yeah. So Kristin, I want to pose this question. Is glass the past? Is it the present? Will it still be the future? I mean, I have my answer. I know Nicolas has his answer, but I want to hear your answer.
So as a young person who has really put my stake in the ground on sustainable alternative packaging, I think that most wine does not need to be in glass. Granted, I am a sommelier. I do have a cellar. I fucking love Piedmont. I'm not going to say, let's put Barolo in a can of wine. Like, that doesn't work, and that wine is not going to be good. I think fine wine and obviously champagne will always be in glass. It needs to be in glass. But the fact that 90% of wine consumers in the US are opening up that bottle within the first hour of purchase, and most consumers are buying around the $20 retail price point, I think the wine industry needs to wake up and start giving the consumers what they want.
That's brilliant. I think we should just stop the episode right there because
there's my hot take. Yeah.
That's your hot take.
All right, dear listeners, now is the time for me to make good on my promise to make a connection between Egyptologists and fine sparkling wine. Because you see, in order to plan ahead, the Conegliano, Valdobbiadene, Prosecco DOCG wine growing region is looking to the past. This forward-thinking appellation has been creating climate models with the University of Cantabria in Spain to forecast weather extremes that may occur over the next 75 years. And in order to manage these future events, they are working with Egyptologists to find out how ancient Egyptians grew fine wine grapes thousands of years ago without the aid of modern chemicals or technology in conditions of extreme heat and drought. And based on their findings, the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Consortio is promoting the construction of rainwater cisterns to capture, conserve, and reuse water. They're also currently studying the effects of salvaging and recycling pruned vineyard wood as biochar and all sorts of other cool things. You know, Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco DOCG has always been a historic region ahead of its time. Have I mentioned that this is a wine region where 40% of the region's wineries and vineyards are staffed by women, and 40% of those women are under the age of 40? But, you know, enough talk, let's taste. Actually, let's taste kind of a classic old-fashioned kind of wine that might surprise you. This is from Prosecco country, but it's actually Metodo Classico. This is the 6-1 Valdobbiadene DOCG Metodo Classico. This is not Martinotti method, people. Rive di Carpesica, and it's vintage 2020. And yes, it's from a Rive, so it's from a cru designation. The bottle is beautiful, and let me have a sip. One moment, please. Oh, wow. Those are some yeasty aromatics. This is really a traditional method wine. This wine is crisp, it's minerally, it's got a lovely creaminess. And, you know, did the ancient Egyptians make traditional method sparkling wine? Probably not, but they would have loved, I am sure, they would have loved Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG. I really, really think so. I just want to thank Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG for sponsoring the Foretop. We've really enjoyed being able to talk about your delicious wines and your beautiful region during our sustainability season. This campaign was financed according to EU regulation number 1308/13.
If we were to start right now and we just invented wine, what we know now about our planet, our environment, all the science, how would we deliver it to consumers? Most of it would be not in glass. Do you think?
I agree.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you look at things like hard kombucha or all of these, you know, natural RTDs and natural spirits products that are launching and reaching a younger consumer, I mean, this is what gets me like so fired up, because I think probably all of us feel this way. There's not a better alcoholic substance than wine. Like, if we care so much about what we're putting in our body, what's better than wine? It's grapes, yeast, water, and thyme if it's made by the right people in the right way. And all of those other sectors are not putting their substances in glass bottles. They're reaching younger consumers through their format.
So, Nicolas, how do you respond to this? You're presiding over a large, respectable, awesome company, Crimson Wine Group, and most of what you do now is in bottle, if I'm not mistaken, right?
99%. We do a little bit of stainless steel kegs.
So could we put you on the spot a little bit and ask you what the future looks like for your company, for Crimson?
I do not see a strong path outside of lighter weight glass right now.
Right.
For most wines that we make. I think Kristin nailed it, which is probably 85% of wines on this planet do not have to be in a glass bottle. The glass bottle should be reserved for long shelf life wines, or wines that actually require aging as part of their quality. Anything else can be packaged in an alternative package. So I agree with that. Then the transition from one to the other is not always easy. I mean, you have brands that are existing in a certain format and people are used to buy them in a certain format. It's probably easier for some brand to come de novo and create a new brand in a new package rather than exist in an existing one that has an existing consumer base that is used to buy it. And I think you can associate yourself with other product you buy that comes in a certain shape, color, or whatever. And if it would change, it would be like, I don't know, I'm not going to buy that toothpaste anymore because it's in a jar and I like it in a tube.
Well, I want to push back on that, Nicolas, because I feel like so many brands, when they need to do a brand refresh, they refresh their packaging and they roll out new packaging. And that's kind of how they get that younger consumer, as Kristin's been talking about. And actually, I'm curious, Nicolas, because you do have an MW like Martin, and you've done so much study in the world of wine. I'm assuming you've done lots of comparison tastings, comparing wine out of aluminum versus glass. And I'm curious, if you were to put, say, Pine Ridge or Archery Summit, these are a couple of your high-end brands, in a beautiful aluminum bottle, shaped like a glass wine bottle, with a natural cork, would people be able to taste the difference if they were tasting blind?
After 10 months, I have no doubt that they will taste the difference. Yeah.
Kristin's smiling.
We do limited edition drops each quarter. So, Nicolas, when you're ready to come experiment in a can with me, the offer is open. Just say the word. We can test it out and do like 75 case drop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, for a short life, shelf life, no problem. No problem on the can. As soon as you get over a certain amount of time, there are reasons why a wine is difficult to keep in an aluminum can. Mainly because a wine at some point may reach that aluminum wall without getting super technical. And you don't want that, because aluminum and low pH wine or high acid wine do not go along together very well.
And the can is a reductive environment.
It is.
So you have to be so careful about what style of wine you're putting in a can. I've definitely made some expensive mistakes in that.
Kristin, tell us a little bit more about that for audience sake. Reductive.
It manifests in taste. There's reductive Burgundy, Chenin Blanc, when it's made in a reductive style, results in increased texture and almost sherry-like quality in the flavor profile. And in a can, it results in a kind of stinky wine. A wine becomes reductive in a can. It's very unpleasant. I've even noticed it from some very large winemakers, which has been really surprising to me. And I realized early on that I'm not a winemaker. And I brought on Kent Humphrey from Eric Kent Cellars to be my partner in all things, because even with my med school dropout behind me, I don't understand the chemistry of winemaking in a way that somebody who's spent 25 years in a winery does.
What if it was like I mentioned before, now I'm seeing these aluminum bottles. They're shaped like a glass bottle, and there's there's a cork in the top. So reductive, for the listeners, is this term meaning no oxygen exchange. But if there's a cork, there's a little bit of oxygen going back and forth.
Well, perhaps that's another conversation about the oxygen transmission through corks. But I'll come to Kristin's rescue. Every package is complicated. And wine is a difficult product because it is a little bit alive. It can have bacteria. There's still a little bit of things to eat in there. So you can be somewhat casual because there's alcohol in it, but you cannot be completely casual about it. Something could happen to that wine, and it's very acidic and low pH, which mean that it's corrosive. Therefore, some type of wines require more care when they go into different containers. And some containers are not appropriate for a certain type of wines if they are too acidic or they have residual sugar or whatever. So can wine, super, but maybe not everyone can go in can, and probably not forever.
Yes, definitely not forever.
So, Kristin, out of everybody who is here, you have most practice speaking to the end consumer. Right, as a sommelier and as a producer. Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, the Nomadica cans arrive in packages printed with the words, "Your sommelier has arrived," right? Talking through the lens from somebody who speaks to the client, how do we cross that divide?
Yeah, I mean, that was my biggest challenge when first launching Nomadica. I mean, and even looking at the landscape, I quickly realized how much money one needs to really engage with distribution and retail. In the US, especially approaching it from the buying side, where you have all the power. And I realized that Nomadica had to compete with big conglomerates, and I didn't have the budgets that they did. So I went on premise first and started going after sommeliers who were accepting of what we were doing and were willing to pour Nomadica into a glass, because we all know wine tastes better out of a wine glass versus a can, and talking about why we're in a can and its sustainability initiatives. and just getting those people on our side, getting the industry, evangelizing why we're in a can was absolutely essential to our success.
Thinking about the quality question and the presentation, and I have to say, when I was writing Sparkling Wine Anytime, which was my most recent book, I didn't include any sparkling wines in can because at the time, this was a few years ago, the quality was not there. And every sparkling wine in a can that I could find, I believe, was forced carbonation, which for our listeners, it was like a soda pop. So Kristin, you have sparkling wines. How do you carbonate them?
Good question.
It's forced carbonated. Yes. There, I think, is one producer who's doing pet knot in a can.
Oh, really?
I have heard that there have been some issues with exploding cans.
Oh.
Nicolas is laughing. All right, Nicolas, tell us why that's not possible to have a naturally fermented wine in it, a sparkling wine in a can.
Well, the first reason is the quality of a sparkling wine that is fermented in the bottle for a long time. Let's pick up a champagne, is a contact with the lees. Because wine in can has somewhat of a shelf life. You would never get to that extraction of goodies from the dead yeast, the contact on the dead yeast over time. And so the can would go bad before, or the wine in the can would go bad before you get the benefit of the yeast contact, or the dead yeast contact.
Okay, but what about like a high level Prosecco, like a Charmat method?
That would be possible. It would probably be quite expensive. We're talking about a can here. An aluminum container may be different, like your idea of a bottle, something shaped like a bottle with a closure, that might be different. But a can has a very large opening at the top. And the way the can is sealed is that you have the tube, basically, or the container that comes, the liquid goes in the can, and then you have the plate or the round piece on the top of the can that is sealed on the top of the can. So there's a period of time during which that can is completely open. And so when you fill something at a high level of carbonation, you need to account for that loss, basically. Even though those cans are usually bottom filled, and so you don't have too much carbonation that is lost during that process. It's highly complicated to have a can that is under high pressure.
And even with forced carbonation, we're talking like 10% loss rates.
Yes.
Doing the canning process, which is expensive. When you're buying.
Yeah, that can. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we need to get all these young students in STEM programs working on this.
But an aluminum bottle would be a brilliant idea, I think.
I mean, I've seen those, but I haven't seen them with a natural cork. But we'll see. So, Kristin, how stable are your wines? Nicolas keeps saying that these wines need to be drunk fairly quickly. Do you have problems with stability, or as long as people drink them within the first 8 months or so, are they okay?
We test them and taste them, and we have a library dating back to 5 years. We feel confident saying that our cans have a shelf life of 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive.
That's impressive.
But again, I would say that's not even me. I'm just the palate here. I would say that's Ken Humphrey and then our head winemaker, Coriel Berry. Their persistence and dedication has really resulted in a great product.
But you're the visionary. Take credit.
I just... I get to do the fun parts of the job, like fundraising. No. And dealing with distributors.
Well, Nicolas, I feel like we've talked about some exciting ideas and a lot of things that are not possible. And I'm just sort of curious, where do you think we are in terms of solving the packaging problems we have in the wine industry? And how hopeful are you that we can get this figured out in the next, say, 10 years?
I think we're very far from solving this. And I think there are not enough people that are trying.
Yeah.
Wine is a very small problem, by the way, compared to many other industries. And so we like to talk about wine and we like to think about it, but we're a very small problem. It's actually quite disheartening to be traveling and paying things and realizing that most people don't recycle. Many products have too much packaging on them. So we are quite far. That being said, I think the conversation around carbon footprint is quite useful because it really makes people realize that there are consequences directly to their lives. And so there are behaviors that are starting to move a little bit and messages on packaging that people are starting to be receptive to. I am worried, like you, Catherine, that there are some other aspect of the waste stream that we're not talking about, like plastic. I love, by the way, I love bag in the box. I think they're fantastic. There are several of our wines that I would love. It's the next evolution, probably, for us to move from lightweight glass, or the lightest weight glass we can find, to bag in the box. But there is a plastic question that is not easy to answer, and so we're going to displace one problem with another, I'm afraid. So I'm hopeful, but I'm afraid we're going to be a little late and slow.
I think we already are late and slow.
Yeah.
We have tested and found that the sustainability aspect of our brand, which is literally why I started the company, ranks the lowest as the reason to buy. And all of the work that we do, like paying more for cans to make sure that we have BPA-free liners, I cannot even emphasize enough how difficult it is to create outer packaging that is recyclable. I always thought if it's paper, it must be recyclable. Absolutely not. It needs to be 2 colors.
No.
Period. You can't have more. No digitally printed paper packaging is recyclable. And I do not think consumers care that much. I think
I don't think, Kristin, I don't think they know. I don't think they know. And unfortunately, we're not telling them probably enough. But I agree with you. It's really hard because when we compete on the market, we are often going against companies that are very cold-blooded, I guess, and capitalistic in their approach and they can cut their cost by doing, quote unquote, the wrong thing. There is no incentive for them, and they have superior margins than we do. And at the end, the good guy gets wiped out because they have small margins and they cannot grow. And the bad guy, or the actor that doesn't, I'm not saying everybody is like this, but if you use I use glass here again, but if you use a bottle of glass that is heavier than 600 grams today, you have no reason to do that. Absolutely none.
Right.
And sometimes those bottles, by the way, are the lightweight bottles are more expensive than the heavier weight glass because they are newer technology and they're a little bit more rare. And so by doing the right thing, you penalize your business. And that's something I believe the government has something to say there. We need sometime a level playing field to help us do the right thing and put everybody on the same playing field. Yeah.
You still have a choice as a consumer. You buy every day and you make choices every day. At the very least, 10 years from now, even if we are fucked and our civilization's climatic cycles are wildly different than they are now, and they're continuing to be, what were you doing to make your choices? Supporting products and brands like Nomadica, Crimson, right? Making your own personal choices, and then saying, I'm going to quit your wine club if you keep shipping wines in styrofoam. Those of you who are listening, if you pick up your glass, you're like, this weighs a pound, it's good. If it weighs more than 1.5 pounds, it's bad. So I'm just going to buy lightweight glass bottles and support those people that are doing the right thing. Within that umbrella of despair, there's a little bit of hope that you are voting. You're voting with your dollars, with your buying decisions.
We got to get some hashtags for this to get the public excited about it.
Well, I think, Martine, that's such a good point. And the data shows that consumers are 7 times more likely to purchase a product if there's an element of sustainability to it. But I think going back to what Nicolas was saying, there's a lot of lies and marketing ploys out there by really big companies. And so how do we kind of navigate those two things? How do we uplift and support the people who are really trying to act with the best foot forward? And I think in the wine industry too, maybe this is just my bitter thought on it, but I think there's a lot of squabbling among small producers and sommeliers. I like to call it the crabs in a bucket syndrome. And I think that as an industry, we really have to address that.
Well said.
Thank you, Kristin.
It must be time to wrap.
Time for the dessert course.
That's right. We have to end on a hopeful, happy note. So we each share something we've been enjoying recently that has something to do with food and wine. And I believe, Kristin, you have something you'd like to share?
Yes, this is kind of crazy, but I'm not really drinking a lot at the moment. And I'm really enjoying all of the really beautiful non-alcoholic beverages that are coming out, particularly the Lights non-alcoholic sparkling Riesling.
Oh,
Whoa.
Nicolas, remember when we had the tasting
What?
group and I had Riesling and I brought that? Do you
Yeah.
remember that? You probably
Yes,
don't. It was years,
I do.
years
I
ago.
do. I've tasted the Dr. Low
Oh,
from Lucerne. I think it's great. And that would be a lovely product in can too.
Yep.
See, I would buy a lot of that in can.
So, Kristin, so do you have bottles to show us of the non-alcoholic wines that you've been enjoying, or is there no proof?
There's no proof, but I'm also enjoying, it's not a wine, but Aplos is my favorite non-alcoholic spirit that I've been enjoying.
What is this? This is maybe your second. You got two for dessert course here. Go
Okay,
for it.
I'm really lucky. Also, I feel like I'm just so entrenched in the world of like consumer packaged goods. I'm like trying everything all the time. Just trying to be hip and relevant here in Los Angeles. Aplos is a hemp-based non-alcoholic spirit with botanicals added to it. And I would say the non-alcoholic landscape has been one of great disappointment for me as I have traversed through it. And so the things that are really great, I'm really holding on to with both hands.
so Nicolas, what did you bring for dessert?
Well, I brought an old-time favorite that brings a lot of things I love together. First, it's French, which is awesome. Second, it has to do with wine. And third, it's a TV mystery. And so there is a French series called The Blood of the Vine.
Oh,
And you can try to find it at the library or something like this. It's a consulting winemaker in France that goes from region to region. And it has that uncanny habit that anytime he goes into one of those wineries to consult, someone dies. And so there is a mystery there to solve, just like one of those old Agatha Christie or Midsummer Murders, if you like British television. So anyway, I love that series, and anytime I can, I try to find it and watch it. It's always in a beautiful wine region, also.
Wow.
ooh, that sounds good. Martin, I told you I want to do a season of the Four Top that's just wine country mysteries. I love that. That's like my favorite two things.
Here we go.
You know what, Nicolas, you checked off two boxes for both of our hosts. You've got something they got excited for Catherine, and you got me excited about another pun. Miss Kristin, when you have a line extension for Nomadica, you've got a name for it. Uncanny.
That's actually great, Martine.
Yeah, no fucking shit. I know.
We'll get you some naming rights for that. That should be rewarded.
All right, Martin, we gotta finish out the show here. What's your dessert?
Okay, fine. Catherine, the more I drink, the better I get as a host. Let's just be honest. So my dessert course is something that I started using recently, which is Imperfect Foods. You guys heard about this?
Mm-hmm.
No idea what that is.
There's been a proliferation of home delivery systems, Hello Fresh and Blue Apron and all these things that are prepackaged. Lots of plastic, lots of packaging.
Yuck.
They're designed to make your life easier, right? Imperfect Foods, they started by taking those like ugly produce with like quirky shapes and sizes, and that just didn't kind of fit the aesthetics of that glistening section of perfect mango sizes and shapes and colors. And they ended up making a market out of people who wanted to accept that produce that would have been thrown away.
The cast-offs. And who doesn't love those carrots that look like little old ladies' faces? Those are the most fun ones.
They look like many things, right? I'm loving the tiny little mangoes that show up, the weirdly shaped salmon cuts. The spinach is just about to go bad, but you get it in time. You make your own stuff, and otherwise it would have been thrown away. So in the spirit of this episode, I'm all for Imperfect Foods.
Excellent. Love that. Well, for my dessert course, once again, I'm going to share some fiction, a novel by the great Barbara Kingsolver. I told two different people yesterday about this book, so I figured I should share it on the podcast. It is a book called Flight Behavior. and it's an environmental sort of dystopia, but it's a positive message. It's a family that lives in Appalachia, and the monarch butterflies, instead of wintering over in Mexico, they get confused and they come and winter over on this poor family's farm in Appalachia. And so all of these environmental tourists show up at this Appalachian farm. And the one funny moment that I keep repeating to people is, we've been talking tonight about how education is so important and getting the message out is so important. And I think part of the problem with the climate change and the sustainability message is that people don't want to be lectured at, and we need to cross that divide between the political parties. And so this character, she basically lives in a trailer home and she's very poor. And this environmental sustainability tourist is there handing out leaflets about the 10 things you can do to live a more sustainable life. And she says, "Oh, can I read one of those leaflets?" And she's reading it and she just starts laughing because, number one, fly less. She's like, "I've never been on an airplane. Eat less meat. The only meat I eat are the sheep I raise on my farm. Stop buying fast fashion." She's like, "The only place I can afford to shop is Goodwill." So it's just so interesting because I think part of solving all of these problems that seem unsolvable is just for all of us to have empathy and just communicate and have conversations with people who are unlike ourselves and kind of find that common ground, and also laugh at ourselves because, how stupid is it that we're telling ourselves to fly less? If anyone's causing climate change, it's those of us who are advantaged enough that we're able to fly and buy fashion and do all those kind of wasteful things. So we should probably be taking a good look at ourselves. But anyway, great book, great novelist. And with that, I want to thank our guests so much for joining us. Nicolas, Quillé, thank you for being here. If you want to read more about what Nicolas does, check out crimsonwinegroup.com.
Merci.
And you can read about Kristin Olszewski at explorenomadica.com. And check out our new website for Napa Rise, risegreen.org, where you can also find me, Martin Reyes, Master of Wine, and I'm also at winewise.biz.
And you can find me, Catherine Cole, at catherinecole.com. But why would you go there when you can go to the Foretop? And you can find all of our social media handles. Let us know what you thought of this episode, what you think about plastic, aluminum, glass, all those things. And please support the Foretop by leaving us a rating on your favorite podcast app.
Signing out from a very kid-filled condominium in Benicia. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
And signing out from the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, in the Willamette Valley. Bye-bye now. Thanks, everyone.
This has been the Foretop Podcast. Catherine Cole is our executive producer, Nick Toole is our producer, and I'm Keelan King, sound supervisor. We are also assisted by audio editor Michelle Richards, media and design manager Ruby Welkovich, and sales director Kristin Castagna. Please visit our website, theforetop.org, to learn more about us, listen to back episodes, and purchase books written by our amazing panelists. If you have not already subscribed to The Foretop on iTunes or Spotify, please do so, and please leave us a rating. Every rating feeds the algorithm and helps new listeners find The Foretop. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.